So thank you everybody for joining today for our panel discussion. We have some amazing panelists today who we'll be hearing from very shortly. So our discussion today is in collaboration with AAPS and Dose of Pharma. So AAPS, which I'm a part of, is the American Association of Pharmaceutical Science, and we're part of the Monash chapter based at Parkville, and Dose of Pharma is a really amazing science podcast and vodcast that release episodes every fortnight, exploring different career pathways and opportunities within the science and sort of healthcare sector. So today we'll have hear from our panelists and have a bit of discussion there before opening to a Q&A session. I'll start with a bit of acknowledgement of the country. So I invite you all to close your eyes and take a moment to appreciate and acknowledge the land that we share today. So I want to acknowledge the Kulin Nations whose land we're gathered on today, whether we're joining from Melbourne, Parkville campus, or from me here in Surrey Hills, the Wurundjeri people. So I pay respect to the elders, past, present and emerging. So thank you for that. To introduce our speakers, we have Savitha Balakrishna and Dr. Yi Ling Low, who both graduated from Monash Parkville, starting with the Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Science. So I'll take it away to Jack and Talia to get the discussion started. And thank you everybody for coming today.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for that great introduction. So hi, everyone. My name is Talia, and we've got Jack as well, and we'll be your hosts for tonight. So on our panel tonight, we have really two amazing guests. We've got Savitha Balakrishna, who has been working at Swisse Wellness for more than 3 years now, starting as an intern and then moving her way up to quality coordinator and now regulatory affairs associate. And we also have Dr. Yi Ling Low, who completed her PhD last year, where she investigated the mechanisms of microglia-mediated neuroinflammation and the role of fatty acid binding proteins in the process. She previously worked as a research fellow as well at Monash and is now working at IP Australia as a patent examiner. So welcome to you both. For our first question, we're wondering if you could both introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your job. We might start with Yi Ling, if that's all right.
Yep, sure. So hi, everyone. Thanks, Ellie and Talia, for the introduction. So I'm Yi Ling. As what Ellie said before, and also Talia, I finished my pharmacy honours degree all the way back in 2019 now. So I majored in formulation sciences. And after that, during my honours year, I did my research project with the Nicolazzo lab. And then after that, I stayed on to do my PhD, where I majored in pharmacology and did a lot of cell-based work. And then after that, during my PhD, I knew that I didn't want to stay on working in the lab. So then after that, I was basically applying left, right, and center. I got a research fellow job at the Center of Research Excellence in Women's Sexual and Reproductive Health with the School of Public Health with Monash. So that was a very big change for me, but it was a fully desk-based job at that stage doing public health research. And then though I did enjoy working in the public health field, I do miss pharmacy quite a bit because that's where my technical skills lie. So I was like looking around, and then I realized, but I then landed a job at IP Australia working as a patent examiner. So right now, basically my job is to assess patents that come through the Australian patent system. Yeah, so that's me.
Thank you so much, Yi Ling. It sounds like you've achieved so much already in your career. It's very, very impressive. Now I'll just hand over to Savitha, if you could also just introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Talia. So hello, everyone. I'm Savitha. I am a Regulatory Affairs Associate at Swisse Wellness. And yeah, like Talia mentioned, I graduated with a degree in pharmaceutical science back in 2020, and after graduating, I got an internship position within Swisse as a product development intern. And once I completed my 1-year internship program, I was fortunate enough to get a position within the quality team. And so I was working as a quality coordinator for about 1.5 years, and I decided I want a bit of a change, and I was fortunate enough to get a position within the regulatory team still within Swisse. That's a little bit about what I've been doing since uni finished.
That does sound like quite a journey. I know from having studied a science degree, and I suppose you can speak on working in science, that it's quite common to be in the lab. But of course, desk jobs are just important and they do exist. So I suppose after graduating, what motivated you to move into a more desk-based role, such as in regulatory affairs and patents? Maybe Savitha, you can speak onto it first.
Sure. Yeah, to be frank, it wasn't really a conscious decision I had made to not get a job in a lab, as during my undergraduates, I did enjoy that lab component. However, 2020 was the year of COVID. There weren't a lot of opportunities available, and I was super lucky to gain that internship at Swisse. But I guess what sort of led me to stay within a desk-based role even after 3-4 years was the fact that I feel like when you're working in a lab environment, you're constantly only talking to your lab mates and everyone else that sort of speaks science in the same language you're speaking in. However, when it comes to a desk-based role, you talk to so many people. Like, you constantly work with people from sales and marketing and customer service. And one thing I loved about having this sort of opportunity is that you're really exposed to the different areas within the industry, and you get to talk to so many people from different backgrounds, different educations, different experiences. And I think that was something I really enjoyed and what sort of led me to continue a sort of desk-based role. Yeah.
That sounds almost parallel to what I do in pharmacy, where, I'll go into the hospital, I'll work with my social workers, the OTs, the doctors, the nurses. Whereas in pharmaceutical science, you go along with the marketing, etc. Another thing I was interested in, maybe Yi Ling, you can speak on this one. What kind of skills that you gain in your lab experience did you find you were able to translate into your current desk-based position? And did you expect or experience any unexpected challenges in moving from the lab into your desk job?
Yep. So I guess I'm going to give you a very cliche answer. So the biggest skill that I think I translated from lab to a desk-based job is actually just organization skills and planning skills. Like, I know that a lot of people say the exact same thing. You probably get so sick of it, but then I didn't know, because I came from a very scientific background, like did my pharm sci degree, did an honors, then did a PhD. I basically spent like 8 years in the lab. So I was pretty worried when I needed to leave. I was like, I'm not going to get a job. So how I got my first desk-based job, which is basically in public health, was they were very impressed with my organization skills and planning skills, which is, I guess, a lot of lab-based people would have anyway, just by planning experiments, planning your day. You probably sometimes have to plan weeks and months ahead, and also your organization skills. So like having a very organized brain, I'm not sure if this would make sense, like things are categorized properly and you know what you're doing rather than just like running off from one spot to another and then coming back. So I guess that's a very important thing for desk-based position, because like you need to keep very organized documents and of what you have done. So I guess that's the main skill that I got from my time in a lab and then translated to a desk-based job. The other role that I think helped a lot was that when I was working in the lab, I was also working as a teaching associate at Monash during my PhD. So that kind of hones on into my organization and planning skills, which kind of helped me got my previous job and also my current job. But my current job is very technical at the moment, so it kind of leaned back into the lab-based work that I did like a while back.
Thank you, Yi Ling. It's very great points that you made there about that idea of having transferable skills. Like you said that you use the skills you worked as a TA and it's helped you now in your current career. And I really like your thoughts on organizational and planning skills and how relevant they are. I feel like I'm a pharmacy student, but I can definitely see the importance of that, not only as a student, but as I progress into like internship and career. So definitely some important transferable skills there. It sounds like you do a lot of like organizational and planning type of thinking in your day-to-day life, but could you describe for us a little bit more about what a typical day in your role might look like?
So right now, I actually just started my job as a patent examiner about 2 months ago. So we are currently in training. So patent is very different from any other industry that there is. So at the moment, basically, all I do is that I'm learning from my seniors, reading through patents every day and applying those skills and knowledges that I've learned and absorbed from my seniors. Because as I said, it is a very unique skill set that I don't think a lot of people know. I didn't even know myself when I stepped into that role until I'm doing it. So it is a thing that you need to learn over a long period of time for you to obtain the skills that you need to do your job. So right now it's basically my day's a bit like uni. So like I go to work, I learn a whole heap of new knowledge and I sit there and like boil over it, mull over my knowledge. But at the same time, because I have to remember that I'm in a job, I'm not in uni anymore. So you have to keep that professionalism at all times, which is like, yeah, it's a bit scary.
Thank you, Yi Ling. Yeah, definitely resonate with the points made there. I like that idea of, yeah, it's a new job. And whilst you have a lot of experience, you still have to continue that learning process. Everything's about lifelong learning these days.
Yeah.
What about you, Savitha? Did you have a similar experience in your current role?
Yeah, definitely. Like what Yi Ling said, every day you learn something new. I think in my role as a regulatory affairs associate, so basically Swiss, majority of products are listed medicines, and listed medicines are highly regulated by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. So a huge part of my role is reading through the regulations, trying to understand what they're trying to say, and sort of feeding that back to the team because, you know, whilst myself and my team might be able to speak regulations and laws and guidelines, not many other people in the business can. So a lot of what my job involves is making sure I can sort of communicate that to the wider business. So a lot of things I work on is making sure that any products or formulations we put out there are compliant with our Australian regulations. Things like, can we use an ingredient that the wider team is proposing? What dose can we use it in? What claims we can make for that ingredient, and making sure we hold that evidence for that ingredient so that we can make those claims. Another part of the role is reviewing a lot of marketing collateral and making sure it is compliant because advertising listed medicines is a regulated space and there are a set of rules that we can and can't do. So yeah, making sure that we're compliant and basically doing anything that, you know, that we put out to the public and the wider population, we need to cross-check and make sure we are compliant with the therapeutic regulations. So yeah, definitely every single day involves a lot of reading, a lot of learning. So yeah.
It sounds, yeah, once again, like a very, very rewarding and interesting role. What's your favorite part of working in this role at the moment?
Oh, great question. I think right now the favorite part is definitely working with like the cross-functional teams. Like I mentioned before, I work a lot with like our sales team and our marketing team and just, you know, hearing their experiences and like, you know, seeing what they know and what I can bring to the table is definitely one of the most rewarding things. And I guess working for a brand, you kind of see how every individual is important and we're all, you know, cogs in a machine and, you know, basically seeing us all come together, work together and bring that final product out in the market is definitely one of the most rewarding things. And, you know, when you do see your product that you worked on a lot in the market is definitely a pinch me moment. So it's definitely one of the most rewarding things about my job.
Yeah, I really like that point that you made about having different members of a team that you work with and all coming together for the shared goal and having like such rewarding outcomes as you've said. Are there any aspects of lab work that you miss, as that's not, I guess, a prominent role of your job at the moment?
I think looking back to my undergrad days, which was when I did do a lot of lab work, I think one thing I definitely do miss is actually using my hands and getting my hands dirty and working with the formulations because, sometimes when you're stuck behind sitting at your desk in front of a laptop, you sometimes forget the big picture idea of like what you're really doing and why you're really here. But I think like one of the things that I do constantly is work with our product development team, look at samples that they bring, and it's a good reminder to like see what I'm working towards and actually being able to physically handle samples. But, definitely do miss a few things from the lab and, spending time doing all these experiments and everything.
Thank you so much, Savitha. Yi Ling, I have a similar question for you as well. So what do you enjoy most about your current job, working, I guess, in a more desk-based role? And do you miss lab work, or what aspect of lab work do you miss?
Right. So I guess my desk job is very different. Well, it's more different. I wouldn't say very different, more different from Swisse. So IP Australia is involved in evaluating patents. It's very interesting because we'll be able to see all first-hand inventions. So all these inventions are brand new. Some of them, it's like mind-blowing. Some of them, how the ideas are just everywhere, but we have to make sure that the patents are all written as according to Australian patent law. So that's the most exciting thing about for me, is just to see all this invention is happening in Australia and happening overseas as well, and how that can help Australia's pharma and all the other industry grow. The thing that I miss the most, as what Savitha is actually working in the lab and using your hands. So I've spent so many years in the lab, refining all my skills. I can do them with my eyes closed at that stage because I've spent so many hours in there. So for example, back then I remember I can count, like, just because of how tight lab time is, I can do cell culture with within half an hour, when you take 2 hours when you're a junior. But I think I've lost all those skills now after stepping out the lab for so long, which is a shame. And I do sometimes miss, when people mention things like pipette, I'm like, oh, I know what a pipette is. I know how to use it, but I'm not sure about it now. So yeah, it is something that I didn't think I would miss, but I definitely do miss it, at times.
Yeah, thank you, Yi Ling. It sounds like hands-on work is definitely something that's missed. But your current role sounds very cool as well, being able to see these brand new ideas and creations. Yes, it must be so exciting, as you said. And I like that you get to see it on like a national scale, but also a global scale as well. I think that's really impactful. So I guess for you, Savitha, in terms of, I guess, regulatory affairs, being a regulatory affairs associate, how does career growth and progression look like in this space?
So there is that one obvious career growth of like growing vertically, being an associate, senior associate, manager. If you are interested in that regulatory space and want to stay here for long term, you can definitely grow in that direction. But also being at Swisse, as I mentioned before, you're constantly communicating with so many different teams on a daily basis that sometimes career growth might look like trying to do something different for a couple of years. So definitely even stepping horizontally into another team, that's also very possible, because you are constantly talking to these different teams and, they do see your potential and they see that you're a good worker and, you're a fast learner and what skill sets you can bring in. I think that was sort of the case with me, coming from a quality background and stepping into regulatory affairs. Even though I didn't have any regulatory affairs experience before, I was able to show the regulatory team that, I bring all of these skills as well as knowledge from quality, because, that's sometimes also useful in regulatory affairs. So even stepping horizontally into different teams and exposing yourself to new opportunities is also like a career growth pathway that a lot of people do take. So there is that option of sidestepping horizontally, if you do want to try out something different.
That's actually really encouraging to hear that you do have this flexibility, both horizontally and vertically, I suppose. And like you touched on, you have a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration, I guess you could say. I'm curious to hear from Yi Ling on, do you see any sorts of parallels in patenting? Do you work with many other departments, and do you have the same sort of step into this role that I'm currently associated with? Or do you want to speak on that for us?
Yep, sure. So in terms of patent, it is actually a narrow field. So there are 4 different intellectual properties in Australia. So there's patents, trademarks, copyright, and plant breeders' rights. What I've heard the most commonly what copyright and trademarks are. So they are under intellectual property, but patents sit alone. So like if you work in patents, normally people stay in patents because trademarks and copyright work quite differently. In terms of within patents, you definitely have an opportunity to grow horizontally, as what Savitha said. So how that works in patents usually is that you can step into a trainer's role, for example, to train the next batch of trainees, which takes 2 years to train. They're like actually very structured training. Or you can step into maybe in court hearings. So there are very different departments inside patents. There are many different sections that after you have finished training and you have your acceptance delegate, you can basically move horizontally as well into very different paths with the patent knowledge that you have, but you have to start off as a patent examiner.
Okay, yeah. So it does sound a bit more challenging, I suppose, in patents, in moving around and that finding kind of flexibility in your career. I suppose that's one challenge. At least it sounds like a challenge to me as a prospective pharmacist. But maybe Savitha, for you, do you experience any daily challenges? And I suppose, are there ones you like, the ones you don't like, especially in the realm of dealing with other disciplines, as you've talked on before? Like I know from my experience dealing with nurses and doctors, it has its own challenges in language barriers, but I can't imagine what kind of barriers you hit in regulations.
You know, a lot of regulations, they're written with very legal jargon. And so I think trying to translate that to the wider teams, and, I can't assume that they will understand because they don't come from regulatory backgrounds. And it's my job to translate that to them. That can sometimes be quite tricky, especially when you are delivering bad news to them, especially when you're saying like, sorry, we can't do this. It's not compliant with our regulations. But yeah, also I guess another challenge is, the regulatory space is constantly evolving, things are always getting changed, regulations are always getting changed. So I guess learning to deal with that and, passing that message on to the business, especially can be quite challenging because sometimes, when there is a regulation change, there is that domino effect where we might need to change products, we might need to change our labels, and all these other teams do need to get involved, and it's more work for everyone. So definitely, trying to communicate that with the team can be quite challenging, but also I'm very fortunate enough to work in a company where they all understand. We work in a listed medicine space. We have to be compliant. It's not just the regulatory department's job to make sure we're compliant. It's everyone's responsibility. So people understand that. Unfortunately, sometimes we do have to deliver that bad news of, sorry, we can't go ahead with your idea. There's been so many scenarios where the marketing team would have like an amazing idea for like an advertising opportunity, and we do have to go back to them saying, unfortunately, we can't do that or we can't say that. Sometimes that's a bit tricky to deal with, but yeah, apart from that, all of these challenges are opportunities to grow and develop. So, when challenges do come, it can be tricky to deal with, but also, you learn a lot from it. So it's quite rewarding at the end.
Thanks so much, Savitha. I really like what you said about like that it's not it's your job to translate and you can't really expect that everyone understands jargon. Yeah. And I feel like as a pharmacy student, that is something that's kind of drilled into our heads all the time, because when we speak to patients, we can't assume that if we use these fancy medical terms that they're going to get it immediately. And I guess even when we're speaking to other health professionals, it's all about kind of being adaptable with that collaboration and communication. And it seems like that's something that both of you do on a regular basis. I did have a question though about one of the challenges you mentioned, Savitha, about these changing regulations. What advice do you have in regards to keeping up with all these changes that are being constantly made?
So I guess when it comes to these changes is always, reading, researching, always, keeping an eye out for these regulatory changes and, really honing on your soft skills that you have, especially your communication skills, because if something does change and it's going to affect so many different teams and it's going to add more work to their plate, it's more about how you communicate it with the team and really trying to pass on the message that, there is a reason why we have regulations in this country, and it's for the safety of the wider population. So really communicating that and, keeping in touch with all these other skills that you have to pass on the message to the wider team definitely does sort of help in this sort of space, especially when things are constantly changing and all of a sudden you realize that, you need to make all of these different changes. So yeah, definitely learning to communicate with the team is such an important skill to have.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that idea of just making sure that everyone's communicated about the change and everyone can be on the same page and learn, I guess, together in that process. So yeah, very, very crucial skill. Speaking of skills, I do have a question for you, I think, for Savitha. So what key skills or qualities are most important for succeeding in your role, and how can students or even graduates kind of work towards developing these skills?
Yeah, definitely. I think coming back to the theme of the talk with, opportunities outside of a lab, a lot of the technical skills you learn at uni, sometimes you might not be able to apply it. I've not done a titration since graduating. So, it's more of these soft skills that you do learn in uni that does come into play when you are working, especially in an office environment, in a desk-based role. So definitely some skills, and I've touched on communication previously, but also teamwork is so important. I know when I was in undergrads, so many times for so many different assignments, you get put into an assignment group with people you've never met from completely different backgrounds and expertise and knowledge levels, and you learn to work with different people to complete an assignment. And those skills I was able to bring into my current role because, I'm working with different teams from different areas, different walks of life, and really working together as one big team to, complete a project. That skill is so important. And I think another skill that's very underrated, but also so important, is creativity. A lot of people might think that working in a regulatory space, you can't be creative, but that's definitely not true at all. I've been in so many scenarios where marketing would come up to us with an idea and, it might not be compliant with the regulations. So instead of straight up telling them, no, we can't do this, figure something else out, we work closely with them hand in hand so that, we can still keep their idea while also being compliant with regulations and slightly, shifting their ideas and sort of bringing it to life. That's where your creative skills definitely come into play. And so many times I do have to pop on that creative hat and, work with these sort of challenges. And yeah, I think it's such a underrated skill to have, but also a skill that can really make you stand out, especially when you are applying for jobs in the regulatory space. So yeah, definitely pretty much any of the soft skills that you do learn at uni can definitely be applied to a job like this.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I love what you said about creativity, and it's so underrated for sure. I think, being able to think creatively in a team environment as well is so vital to mitigate these challenges, and having that clear communication, being adaptable in the teams. It really is what they do teach us at uni, and it is what we go on to do later in life. So yes, definitely a very valuable skill, soft skills, definitely to master. And what about Yi Ling? In terms of key skills or qualities, are they kind of similar to what Savitha has discussed, or anything you can think of that'll really help students or graduates succeed in a role similar to yours in the future?
Yep. No, so definitely agree with Savitha, where a lot of the soft skills are very translatable. It's, to be honest, unless you go into a very technical lab background, I don't think you would utilize 30 or 40% of your skills that you've obtained from uni. Unfortunately to say, like I didn't realize how brutal is a very brutal word, but just how soft skill focused the job is. As long as you interview well, you articulate yourself well, they're happy to take you in and train you from scratch. It doesn't really matter. So I guess like the key message I'm trying to get across is that learning how to articulate yourself and being able to then get that message across to your boss, your supervisor, or even your colleagues is very important. Because I think as scientists, a lot of us, I think Savitha touched on this at the very beginning, we're very siloed into working with only lab people. So like we don't really know how to talk to people properly not in a bad way, but like we kind of think very similarly in the lab. So like when you step out into a different environment where you mingle with people with slightly different backgrounds, we start to, well, I find that I struggle to articulate what I want to say. I'm like, oh, it's that thing that I'm saying, but I don't know what that word is, or like everything's just jumbled into words. So I guess that's a very important skill that I think graduates do have. Is just you just have to hone in on that and sharpen that skill to move forward in your career. And another thing, I guess, for my job is because my job is very client facing, and being a patent examiner requires a lot of scientific technical skills. So my job is very unique in the way that you can actually utilize all your scientific skills that you have learned from the lab. It's just that you don't have to do it hands-on. So you need to understand how formulations work, how does cream work, or what does a diluent do in a formulation. All these you need to know. You just don't have to physically put it into a beaker and mix it. Yeah, so just basically big message, learn how to articulate yourself and communicate well. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think that being able to articulate yourself well, especially in the context of an interview, especially when you're going against other candidates with the exact same training as you, it can be quite confronting when you do hit that kind of reality. As you said, it can be brutal. But in consideration of this, like yourselves, both you, Savitha and Yi Ling, you've transitioned from one area in the industry into another. So I think, Savitha, briefly, maybe you could kind of talk to us, for those that are considering transitioning, such as you did, from other areas of the industry to areas of regulation, what kind of advice would you give to them, or even to the students that are considering going to regulations?
Yeah, I think for anyone that's currently in the industry now that does want to make the shift into regulatory affairs, I think definitely think about the skills you have right now, like, especially those soft skills, but also even like technical knowledge. I think, quite a few times in my day-to-day job now, I do use the skills and like the technical knowledge that I did possess when I was in quality. So definitely think about, what skills you have now and how you can apply that in the regulatory space. And definitely if you're, I think, current company that you're working in, if it's in pharma, see if they do have a regulatory department and make close connections with those people, ask them about what their role entails, and definitely, do put yourself out there. It might be a bit difficult because I know for a lot of regulatory jobs, when you put in your application, they always ask for regulatory experience, but you need the job in order to have experience. It's a very chicken and egg sort of situation. So definitely don't be discouraged by that, and really put yourself out there and show all of these amazing skills that you do have, because a lot of things can be taught, but some of these soft skills like communication, teamwork, creativity, you need to sort of possess that already and, build on it. So yeah, definitely bring those skills to the forefront, and, try reach out to people in that regulatory space. But I think for any current students that are studying and do want to jump into a regulatory space after graduating, definitely look into internships and graduate roles. Just a bit of a shameless plug, Swisse also has a fabulous internship program, which I recommend everyone check out. That's what I did, and that's how I was able to step foot into the industry. So definitely have a look at all of these internship programs, graduate programs, and yeah, they can definitely help in, seeing what you want to do, because sometimes you might have an idea of, oh, I want to do quality. But then once you're in quality, you might think, you know what, I might want to explore something else. So definitely take advantage of all of these opportunities. And yeah, definitely start your career research as early as you can. Especially when you're in third year, don't wait till you finish your exams and you're completely free to start, making your resume. Definitely take it as like a subject of its own and, practice interview questions, create your resume, do research, see what companies are out there that you're interested in, and see what sort of opportunities are out there. So yeah, that's probably my advice for current students.
That's very insightful. And yeah, you got to make sure that resume is up to date and that you can actually communicate that you do have those soft skills that are so important. Maybe Yi Ling, you can briefly give us a piece of advice to those already in the industry or the students that are considering going towards patenting. Yeah, what advice, say if I want to go into patents, what would you tell me?
Right. So I guess, I don't know, actually, now that I think about it, like, I don't think patents is a thing that is mentioned at the forefront. Like, it's just working quietly in the background. How I came up, well, I talk about my experience simply because like that's the closest I could relate. So I didn't even know patent exists. I think I've heard about a talk once in my whole undergrad life. And then what happened was that I came across Seek and I was like, oh, look, patent examiner. Hey, look, they need a PhD and also technical skills. Boom, boom. Yep, applying. I didn't know what I was jumping into. But then now that I'm in this job, I think can say that for anyone who is looking to step into the patents role, especially like basically people in this, attending this podcast or this webinar, we all have very technical and scientific skills to begin with, which is a massive tick for patent examiners because they require people for all different kind of backgrounds. It doesn't have to be a specific scientific background. You could be from pharmacology, chemist, BDB, anything you can think of, they are willing to accept because of how wide range the patent field is. And also for any graduates that are looking for a job, I totally agree with Savitha, where constantly work on your resume. Don't leave it every 6 months. Oh, I forgot to update my LinkedIn. I should have done that. So like definitely make it like a 6-month thing. And then how the patent world works, I think it's a bit different from how pharma industry works in the way that because we're absorbing people from a variety of backgrounds and it's also like a legal job, therefore it doesn't really matter if you don't know anything. As long as you bring with you your technical skills, your scientific skills, and you're able to communicate, they're happy. And yeah, they're happy for you to apply and then just go for it. So it is very different from certain pharma industries where prior experience is actually not a requirement. So it is like a big tick for graduates that are basically looking for a career. So you don't even need a PhD for it. Some of them, I have colleagues that literally just graduated from the undergrad. After 3 years of science, boom, they landed a patent examiner job. It's like, wow, you genius. So basically, just try and you never know you'll get it. And just network, communicate with people, talk to people that you think would help you get into field. And then, I definitely agree with what Savitha said about work on your resume. I did not do that until like I knew it was too late. Whoops, but got lucky.
Yeah, not me rewriting my resume last night. But thank you so much for your insights. I think that's my last questions. So I think I'll pass back to Ali now and give a bit of a wrap up if we can. Go into our Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Savitha and Yi Ling, it was great to hear about your experiences. And as someone who I was trying to update my resume the other day, it's good to know that actually working on that is worthwhile. So thank you. I think we have one question, or we've got a few questions actually. So Savitha, am I or throw to you first. Have you found that there's a big difference between the quality and the regulatory fields in terms of what you actually do in the day-to-day, and kind of how did that transition come about? So was it just something you decided you wanted to do, or the opportunity came up?
Yeah, I think there is quite a bit of difference between quality and reg affairs, but there are also quite a few similarities. I think the end goal is always the same. You want to keep the population, you know, make sure the products you're putting out there, they're safe, they're efficacious, and that's a common goal you sort of have between both quality and reg affairs. When it comes to the day-to-day tasks, however, it is quite a bit different. Being in reg affairs, your main focus is on making sure that we are compliant with the regulatory standards set in place by the TGA. However, with quality, it's a bit different in terms of your main goal is to ensure that the products you're putting out there are of quality, are of good quality, and are safe and efficacious. So day-to-day tasks are quite a bit different, but I think at the end of the day, it's the same goal on both teams. And yeah, I think when it comes to, I think, the skills that you do have, you use a lot of the same skills, honestly. I think the whole communication, creativity, all of that comes into play for both departments. Yeah.
Yeah, great answer. I think, it sounds like what you did was really different in both roles, but I really like the point that you made earlier about, you know, you can kind of feel like everybody's a cog in the machine, but you're always there and you're always working towards the same goal. So that's great. So we had one more. So I guess for people looking for their first job, and I guess speak to your experiences, or if you know for international students as well, what kind of opportunities are there maybe in your fields or what you've experienced for internships as kind of a way to get experience in these roles? Yeah, maybe you Savitha as well. So.
Yeah, definitely, like, you know, have a look at, you know, internship positions and entry-level roles and graduate roles, and try not to be discouraged by, you know, whether you're a domestic student or an international student. You know, usually companies, they look for like the people that they want to hire and whether they possess certain skills and do have the knowledge that they're looking for. So definitely put yourself out there, attend a lot of these networking nights, you know, introduce yourself to many people. And yeah, a lot of companies do have that opportunity for international students, whether it be a full-time role or an internship program. You know, they're definitely welcome. So yeah, definitely put yourself out there, see, you know, what you're interested in, and yeah.
Yeah, how about you, Yi Ling? Did you jump straight into a position, or did you kind of do any training programs or internships post PhD?
Once I finished PhD, I got a job as a research fellow at Monash at the School of Public Health. But in saying that, I was jumping into a brand new field. So like rather than branding of intern or a trainee, I was given the title of research fellow, which was a bigger shoe, but I went in blank as well because public health is basically working very closely with frontline workers such as doctors, nurses, and pharmacists, which was basically who I was working with the entire time. So it was a very steep learning curve for me, like simply because I didn't have the title of intern or trainee. Or what I was doing, even though I didn't know what I was doing. So I was basically learning on the job. But then if you're just a graduate, like looking for a job, I do encourage just apply whatever and see what lands. Like I would say, don't be too picky in terms of what you want. Like your is not going to be your first job unless you're very, very lucky. You're not going to get your dream job on the first, like on the first go. So just try to land somewhere around that little range that you're aiming, and that's good enough. And then, as I think we touched on today, move horizontally or vertically, then would be good.
Yeah, great point. And I think a fear that a lot of people have moving into your first role is that, okay, this is what I'm going to do, you know, for the next 40 or 50 years of my life. And I think that's just not how industry works or any industry works anymore. So yeah, that's some really great advice from both of you. Savitha, another question for you. How did you find it, or did you find it easy kind of to move within Swisse, going from the quality team to the regulatory team? Is that an easier transition than if you were to, say, try and apply to a regulatory position at somewhere else in industry?
Yeah, definitely it was a easier transition because being in quality, I worked with the regulatory team very often. I knew everyone there really well, and, you know, all the skills that I did possess, you know, I was able to show it to them previously just by working with each other closely. So that definitely did help that, you know, I was in Swisse, and I feel like it might have been a bit more difficult for me to get into a regulatory job outside of Swisse. And yeah, that kind of leads on to what I mentioned previously. For anyone that is wanting to move to a regulatory role that's already in the pharma industry, definitely talk to the regulatory department within your company. I feel like it is much easier to sort of go through that pathway as opposed to, you know, applying for a regulatory role outside of Swisse. But that being said, you know, there are a few people in the regulatory team that didn't have regulatory experience and were from previous companies before. So yeah, definitely, you know, going into regs within the same company isn't the only pathway. It definitely does make your life a bit easier, but, you know, if you want the role bad enough, I'm sure there is some sort of way to get into it.
Yeah, I think that really comes back to your point about networking as well, and you know, who you have a chat with at, like, you know, in the team room, you never know where that's going to lead to. So
exactly,
yeah. I think that's pretty much all we've got time for today, but thank you so much, Savitha, Yi Ling, Jack, Talia, Christine as well in the background. Yeah, it's been amazing to hear your experiences. Thank you for your time as well. But yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, team.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Swisse Pharma acknowledges the traditional custodians of the various lands throughout Australia on which we connect today, and pays respect to elders past, present, and future.